So we are recording. This link will be sent out to you as well, and to everyone who RSVP'd. And it may be used to support other relevant information sessions that we have in the future. So please stay muted if you're not speaking. Feel free to rename yourself. If you have like your organization's name there, it may be helpful to rename yourself. We're going to use the chat robustly if you want to use reactions, the raise hand function, and so on. Live transcripts are available. All right, so you can access those under the More button if you so choose, and you can also turn them off if you need to. So if you saw an email from me a couple of hours ago, I spoke about the purpose of this session, and we're going to share the overarching application comments that we received from the reviewers. I have to say, the reviewers, there were 32 of them, very excited to be a part of this process, and many provided comments, just overarching comments, and I wanted to make sure to be able to share those with you. I want to give you an update on getting your individual application reviewer comments and level set those expectations, and then of course talk about more funding opportunities and hold space for you to ask questions and comments. And I'm just going to keep rolling, and I will kind of check in on the chat a little bit later. So something that I already mentioned, facts. This was a numbers game. There were 456 applications. We had $160,000 to distribute across the region in this first round. And then we had 18 awardees. So in many ways, it was a numbers game. In many ways, many people were eligible and applications were worthy of funding, but we had a numbers game. We knew that we wanted to give an average of $10,000 to awardees, and so that played with us. And we had this is a pilot. This is the first time we're doing this, and we had no idea how many applications we would get. One day it was 75. 2 days later, there were 250, and then at the end, there were 456. So it showed me that, and it showed all of us that we were on the right track with this work. So I'm gonna jump into the application reviewer comments. Those are the overarching comments, and you will also get this slide deck. I'll send the slide deck with the link I'll send the slide deck as a PDF, and then the YouTube link to this recording. So, and I just kind of copied and pasted from the comments directly. And I'll tell you, let me give you some understanding of how the application reviewer how the application reviewers were structured. So 456 applications from across the West, including Guam and American Samoa. We didn't have any applications from the CNMI in the first round. And what we did was we wanted to allow reviewers to evaluate applications by state or by jurisdiction. We really, in some way or another, wanted to be able to try to compare apples to apples, particularly because we know California is going to always have many applications. Colorado, California, those are always, hundreds more than the others often. And so we wanted to be able to level set. So application reviewers were asked how many they wanted to review. They could review 18, they could review 7, they could review 100 based on their time and availability. They were compensated $10 per application that they reviewed, commented on, and scored. And so from that, they were grouped. California had like 8 different reviewer sets. And then states like Oregon and Colorado and other large ones had a couple of sets. So my point in telling you that is that when you were looked at, if you were New Mexico, you were evaluated with other folks from New Mexico. That was the way that we decided to do it, because often a Wyoming and a Montana and an Alaska and a Hawaii, we find, particularly, again, I'll use California because I'm from California. When you have large urban centers like a California or Colorado, people's access to resources to help them write applications and have all the words, it can vary, and experiences vary. So I think you understand where I'm coming from with that. And so I'm going to launch into some of these comments and we can talk about it. I know these reviewers pretty well, so I can also unpack a few things as needed. That said, if there aren't things that I have the answer to, I can always get information to you later. This application reviewer felt that by and far, and this person read a lot of applications, that most people didn't answer the last question with as much depth and detail as the other 3 questions. And you'll see later on that folks said that maybe there was another application reviewer that said question 4 and question 3, and I hope you have your application nearby, but question 4 and question 3 and question 4 had some similarities, and the stronger applications were able to distinguish between the 2 and really answer them. So I've seen a trend where reviewers were really providing higher scores and more favorable comments to those who really were able to distinguish and thoroughly answer questions. And then this person says, I did give extra points to people who included samples of their work. Now, you did not have to include samples of your work. And I specifically instructed the application reviewers not to deduct because it was not a requirement. But if reviewers felt that the samples added were additive to them understanding the proposal, then they decided to provide extra points or looked at those more favorably. So I would encourage, just in general, and I think just in general, when you're applying for something, if something is optional, just do it anyway. If it's optional, do it anyway, because in numbers like 456 applications, your question to yourself is, what do I have to do to stand out? A person could be reading 100 applications. They're taking their Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, more than likely, to read all these applications, but they've got a lot, they've got volume. So just human nature, things will stand out. And what can I do to stand out, to really clearly present who I am and my body of work as it relates to whatever application. And this was Colorado and Oregon. I left this statement in because I see this kind of thing a lot, where this state had more competitive applications, and so that this bears witness to what I'm saying and why we as WESTAF are moving to have reviewers review Colorado, review Oregon, review Arizona as a group, because there's just differences. And then the next point, I'm just gonna go off camera for a second because I've got this on a second screen. The artists who stood out to me and that I recommended for funding gave a 3-dimensional portrayal of who they are, what type of art they produce, how they plan to develop it, and how they define and connect to their community. I think, and you all can, bear me out on this, one of the unique features of this application was this connection to community. And so that was super important that that came through strongly. And this, I will say too, that this session we're in right now is a co-learning. There's some feedback for us as WESTAF, and I wanted to be transparent and share those things with you as well. We, as you see in this first point, we did not have an information session for applicants. And that is something that we are definitely going to do moving forward. And that's one reason I wanted to have this session with you. And this is also a practice that we're having to connect with folks who maybe didn't get a funding opportunity, but that doesn't mean that you aren't important to us and we don't want to support you. So, and so hopefully this will help you with the next round as well. So with that said, we will be having informational sessions. We'll have a larger staff and we'll have more opportunity to support applicants. 3 things about this process. I found applicant questions 2 and 3 this is where I mentioned before. 2 and 3 very similar, and most applicants seem to struggle to differentiate between financial need as answer for number 2 and creative need in number 3. And I will just pause here too and say that I did not review applications, but I did look through some, particularly looking at those of you who did video recordings. And I noticed, whether it was written form or on video, that folks even visibly struggle to say, this is the amount of money that I need. And I'm going to turn on my camera for this one. I think that is something that we as BIPOC people, as artists and arts leaders of color, it is something that we tend to be more challenged with, because maybe we have not learned that as a practice as others have. But I want to encourage you to say what you're worth, to say what your program, your art is worth, and don't be shy about that. Don't feel bad about saying what you need. I saw that in some folks' faces. I don't know if it was anyone here, but I remember that. And so I just want to encourage you, think about what your financial need is, because we ask that question. One, it lets us know, has this person thought through what their need really is? And then there's a feasibility element of it too, for what they are saying they need from these funds. For some, we were not able to provide what they asked for, but they were able to articulate why the need and what it was going to support. And I just want to encourage you to spend some time thinking about that. We are not planning to change the questions. We might refine based on some of this feedback, but the essence of the questions will be the same. Oh, because I do see a hand, I do want to pause. I can see a hand. Someone is using the hand raise function. Do you want to unmute and speak? Yes, I see you.
Hey, thank you for having this session. And this is more than I feel like a lot of granting organizations do, is allow for conversation. So I appreciate y'all holding space in this way. I know for me, my confusion was it just in the application, it said, if you could ask for a dollar amount, how much would it be? And so it just asks for a dollar amount. I'm accustomed to applications kind of having a section that has the budget to say, okay, how much you want for what? How much you want for what? How much you want for what? And I didn't know whether or not I should have built that into the application. But that would be so helpful if what it seems like the reviewers were seeking was clarity, and it didn't seem like the questions were asking for an itemized list of what you want and what are you using it for? Because I made that for myself, but I didn't plug it into the application because it seemed like the application wanted to make my life easier and not make me make a budget. But it seemed like it was harmful in the end.
Thank you for that, Vogue. I think hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you for that. And I will say, so another unique feature about this was of, by, for, all of, with, all of it. Our application designers worked with Miss Margie, and they are part of our Leaders of Color network. There were also, ironically, 18 designers. And one of the things that they wanted was for you all to be able to dream, and put your number, whatever it is, no questions asked. We were not looking for a specific proposal, but in your expression of your creative need, this kind of thing can show up. So not a budget, but a description of what you are going to do, how the impact on your community, all of those things were meant to come together. That said, I do take this point, and that's one area that we'll look to refine and really clarify. We don't want to go backwards and have you all do a whole budget, but we do want to be more clear about what we were expecting, and that we did want some narrative of your need and your use. Okay, thank you. This was interesting because I'm on the first point here about having an applicant who chose to do a video, and they felt that that video application was the weakest. And, this was our first time, branching away from the written word. We want to continue to do that. We are looking for more sort of professional development around that. Those who have maybe organizations that maybe have more mastered, for lack of a better word, the use of video applications and guiding applicants who use video applications. That said, I would just remind folks that using a video application, because I did look at some of those, if you choose to be conversational, what are you still doing to stand out, right? You still have to draw someone's attention because it is a numbers game, because there's so many applications. How are you in your video presentation going to be impactful? This person found the essay was clearer and so on. So you may need to write and then produce your video, right? So that you are very, very clear about what you're presenting before you push record. I think that's something to think about. This next point was about applicants not able to articulate a clear, concise, and feasible plan for how they plan to do. Sorry, my screen is in my way. How they plan to use the funds. This would strengthen their applications. Okay. Again, we're going to refine, and we're going to have an orientation process. That said, as I spoke to some reviewers, even while they were in the process of reading applications, some reviewers felt like there were words here, and in the middle somewhere was the answer to the question. So again, how do I focus? How do I grab attention? Take out all the flowery words that might be at the top or woven in, and just answer the question directly. I think that that's something that has for sure come out. And I know one reviewer, this person made a lot of notes in the comment section. And what I noticed is that person was copying and pasting language from the application. And I said, well, what are you doing? And that person said, well, I'm trying to pull out the answer so that when this person sees my comments, they will know that the answer was here, but it was getting lost in so many words. So that's something to think about. And I see another hand. Vanessa?
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you for having this session. I think this is really impactful helpful and I love the transparency of the process. I just want to do a little bit of a call in, especially for the comment previous about how the panelists view the video. I think in the future, having panelists that have a very intersectional perspective of disability justice and or has some kind of familiarity with disabilities, because I think the way, you know, some disabled folks need to express themselves may not be the same way as a neurotypical person. Also, the idea of like language barriers, right? The idea of language justice when it comes to these things. Maybe essays are not really the best way to communicate for that person. Yeah, so I just feel like, you know, in the future, having a more intersectional perspective in the panelists will definitely help, especially when there are video submissions, because I think it's pretty amazing that you all already are incorporating video submissions. I think that's an important feature in this application. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring that forward, and yeah, thank you. And Dot.
Thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciate that. Sujata, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Do you have a question?
Yes. So earlier you had mentioned that the connection to the community came through. So I was just wondering, what does the connection to community, like, you know, what was expected, or like, you know, I know it cannot be a single answer, but like, you know, what would comprise of a good connection to communities, I guess. That's what I'm asking.
Well, one of the comments, I'm not directly answering this question, but one of the comments that a reviewer made was, and I think it's going to come up later, having some type of application guide, some best practices. This is our first round. Our ability to maybe share some answers that were strong or some bits of answers is something that we'll have to discuss internally and even with awarded applicants, you know, to see if that might be possible. But I think the point that I was trying to make there, and the point that reviewers are making, there's a specific question on how will your receipt of funds directly impact your community, right? So we're looking for community impact. So a description of like, it's going to allow, I don't want to give too many examples because the examples depend on you and your relationship with your community. If it's going to allow you to open your home and have teaching sessions with kids from your neighborhood, you know, that kind of thing, or you taking a retreat, having a time of rest before you launch into this new project is going to make you stronger for this community program that you're working on. You know, it just really is based on the individual really articulating, how will this impact the community? How will it impact not just you, but the people around you, and being able to clearly sort of explain that. And I don't know if that was helpful enough, Sujata, but what we will for sure look at in future is how we might share some examples of language that is really clearly articulating the connection between you as the artist and community impact. We will for sure.
So what confused me was it at somewhere in the application, one of the questions was individual practice, right? So as an artist. So I was confused whether, like, you know, most funds are looking for community program, but this one, to me at least, it looked a little bit different, that it was encouraging us to talk about our practice as an individual artist. So that kind of confused me and threw me off. So that is why maybe I did not include as much of community aspect in words. So yeah, some examples would be helpful here.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Yes, so I just pulled up the 4 questions. Identity. Tell us about your identities, your specific need. What do you need to thrive, ideate, take risks, experiment, dream? And folks, so this is an example, right, where the specific need, and it says these points may include financial, material, and holistic. So there is where we wanted to understand your need and your ability to articulate that need. Then the creative practice, as you're saying, Sujata. And then the last question was public and community benefit. How will the impact of your work elevate your community? So it was identity, need, practice, community. Anything, Ms. Margie, that you'd like to say as, the facilitator of the designers on that piece?
Yeah, thank you. I was making notes so I wouldn't forget this one thing to say. This particular application, as Anika says, is a first time. But I want to encourage you to think about the fact that this is leading a trend. And so every opportunity that you have to help us clarify, make more clear, broaden things, this is a desire that we have. The designers who were in the same sort of career path as you guys are, numbers of years in the field, et cetera, the designers wanted to hear from the individual their own construct to answer the question, rather than saying, here is the box. So we probably had 450 different ways to respond as we had individuals. And I'm just saying this to you to say that, and I'll close with this, with more about this later, but the way you think, act, and work is what we wanted to hear. Just be focused about that, because there are only so many moments, so many nuggets of information. Clarity is king. And I feel for you, because you guys really are leading a charge to shift. We want to lead this shift away from tell the funder in the application what the funder wants to hear. And we're also accustomed to that it may have come, second nature, but keep at it. But I will just say that there was a moment during the design process when I had to do an aha, that the designers were saying, we no longer want to have to respond to this formulaic kind of process. We want to be able to talk about ourselves and what we need. And that's new for you guys. It's new for us. It's new in the field. And so don't be discouraged by all that. But I think that's that's my take on wanting to keep you encouraged and to understand that this is the first time you've had this kind of opportunity to talk about yourself and what you need, but it won't be the last. Not only from WESTAF, but other funders, national, regional funders, are trying to let you know that they've been hearing you as a generation of artists.
Thank you so much, Ms. Margie. Thank you, Vogue, for putting the questions in the chat. I also did a little bit higher. So just to refresh on what those questions were as we're going on here. Did I skip a page? No. Okay, this was an amazing process. My only note is that it was really competitive. I included this because I wanted to, maybe just hear from you all. If there was another, I'm going to read it. If there was another parameter that you wished we had asked about, is there a question that you wished we had asked that you feel like you could have shown more or been more clear on? So the note in the middle of the page is, my only note is that it was really competitive group of applications, which is awesome, but I found myself wanting 1 or 2 additional parameters to apply to candidates that were tied in my mind with amazing projects and well thought out proposals to help determine who to bump up in score. just shows how wonderful everybody was, right? I'm sure a great deal of thought went into the review criteria, but it might be worth considering one more parameter to guide reviewers. So one more sort of differentiating work. So the samples of the work, which it was available for folks to do samples. We wanted to keep it optional because I have to say, I have particular concerns when we're not judging your work. So I want to make sure that reviewers are not trying to judge your work and then putting points to that. So it's a bit of a challenge, but calendar timeline for when things would be carried out. Thanks for that. I see Jamari with a hand. Thanks for that.
Oh.
This Jamari?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for everything. This is really helpful. I just wanted to clarify the difference between, you had talked in the beginning about, one of the reviewers said there was a lot of similarities between questions 2 and 3. And for me personally, and the person that I saw that won in my region, there is a difference in access to financial resources. And so because of that, the question may have seemed the same, but for some of us as artists, the financial access is what prohibits us from doing so much. So I wondered if you could just tap into how we could word that differently or something so it doesn't sound the same, because they're saying that kind of was a little bit repetitive, but if that is your main need, then that is your main need, and how do you word that accordingly?
I appreciate that. And definitely hear that and want to clarify any ambiguity between questions, any of the questions, and how to clarify. I see there's more questions in the chat, but thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. And I see that there's some other comments about established artists. We'll come back to a bit of that. Okay, so we're almost at the finish line. It's 43 past the hour. I want to just tell you about other funding opportunities that you may or may not, some you won't know about, some you may. And some of these are more geared towards arts organizations than artists or arts administrators. So our Tour West grant program that has been going on for 20 plus years is going on right now. It is for arts organizations, presenting organizations that are bringing in artists for touring to be able to provide funds for that. So the applicant needs to be an organization, a presenting organization. But what we find is it's good for, and I have to say at this point, largely Tour West is geared towards performing artists. That will be changing in our next round. We all, as regionals, have been having conversations with the National Endowment for the Arts, the funder of that program, of the touring program, so that we can really ensure that there's a diversity of art forms. But touring programs, so one thing that we found is artists are starting to reach out to arts organizations to say, hey, you want to bring me to your region, to your areas, maybe more rural or remote. We do tend to focus on rural and remote areas with Tour West. It is modest funding, but it is supportive of artists. And so it's an area that you can direct presenters to apply for funds to help bring you. So we're trying to make sure that we're telling artists about that. And then you may know that the National Leaders of Color Fellowship Program, we had our first cohort of that. WESTAF has run Emerging Leaders of Color program for years, and now we developed a national program with our counterpart regional arts organizations. And then the fall, we will be having that second round. One of the I want to say this is like, you're hearing this hot off the press, but one of the major feedbacks was around compensation for the fellows. And that is something that we are figuring out, relooking at the budget to determine how we can support the fellows with, it might be modest, but with some compensation. So, and then again, if you are with an arts organization, the National Endowment for the Arts, we have an equity grant program coming up that is funding arts organizations that are working for, with, and by community. And so that's going to be a real opportunity. So each region will have its funding pool. And so we will have a few $1 million to fund organizations that are working for, with, and by community. Then our second round of the BIPOC Artist Fund, what we're talking about now, I need to make sure I'm giving Miss Margie some space because she's a part of the Fellows Program and this program. And so we have coaching that's going on with the awardees. And so she runs that coaching. And so our next round, we're looking at, by this time next year, we will have selected a new cohort. So, and then the Wallace Foundation, we are also having a regranting program, somewhat similar to the National Endowment for the Arts, except with the Wallace Foundation, that funding will be able to fund LLCs, non-501c3 organizations. And so we're really excited about that. So I'm going to drop in the chat in a second, the link to our mailing list. The best way for you to stay on top of all opportunities that are happening at WESTAF, and there may be others that pop up and are relevant for you, is to join our mailing list, is to get those emails every couple of days, because there is good information there. So I'm going to give you that link in a second. And then here we are at Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing. All right. I saw there were some questions in the chat. I just want to. Okay, sorry, my screen keeps going away. All right, here we go. There you are. All right, so let's see if there's questions in the chat.
I think Luis has his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Margie. Luis, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that at least the questions in the chat were addressed. But I think my observation maybe encompasses some of the questions and comments that I was reading in the chat, which includes number one, was this particular grant program maybe modeled after other artist fellowships, individual artist fellowships? Because last year, the California Arts Council, for the first time in like 25 years, offered their individual artist fellowship grant program. They did it in basically 3 sort of categories: one for emerging artists, one for mid-career artists, and one for established artists. And obviously, given the amount of funding that WESTAF had to work with, you know, that might have been difficult to accomplish in the same sort of structure. But that was one question that I had, you know, was this particular application maybe modeled after something similar? And number two, if in the future, you know, with this feedback that you're receiving from reviewers and maybe from us today, you know, would there be an opportunity to expand the funding and also incorporate some elements that would make it perhaps more equitable and also more like apples to apples comparisons, because as a literary artist, for example,
Mhm.
not clear if my application was judged based on other poets that were applying, in terms of creating new works of poetry and other literary art forms. And also, how is all of that going to maybe, give us as applicants an opportunity to better understand the sort of nuances to the questions, because each artist is going to approach these questions based on their particular practice. And, some of those things like video, may not serve that specific, practice. Like looking at the application, I saw there was a field for image uploads, but no field for PDF uploads. So again, me as a literary artist, like I'm kind of put in a situation where I can't really share my work unless if I perform it, which is, going to require obviously a certain level of production. And with that level of production, then also, put me in a field that is not in apples to apples comparison with other poets that maybe don't have access. So there's a lot of little things that I'm bringing up that I feel were brought up in the chat, and I don't expect an answer, but I think there are at least questions that are worth bringing up in this platform. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Luis. Oh, there's so many questions, and I don't want to miss. If you've, okay, I see. Let me go with Dawi.
Yeah, it's Daily.
Dawi.
First, I just want to start off and say what a positive experience this was for me. I'm coming from the film industry, which has felt flat out traumatic with the grant application process. I see some nodding heads, so I know I have some film fam in here. So I actually thought this was a shift, like, oh, I'm entering the art world and it's different. Like they want to see you as an artist. So thank you so much for all the thought you put into this, for the way you've communicated with us all throughout this process. Like I feel respected, and that's a huge leap forward. I think people have articulated this way better than me in the chat. But Meridian especially had a good post about this, but I think a lot of us who have spent years, decades applying for grants, the cardinal rule is to answer the exact question that's being asked, not give any more, not answer something off that's tangential. So for those of us who have been trained that way, again, I think just really knowing what you all are expecting to hear in an answer. I think some of that was just lost in the communication with us through these beautifully open-ended questions that saw us as artists. So I just think bridging that a little bit more would be super helpful. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for your kind comments. Honestly, we do want you. We respect you so much, and we want you to feel seen. Vogue, I see your hand. I wonder if folks either want to, if you don't want to unmute, if you want to copy your question in the chat, just because there's so much and I don't want to miss things that are really, really pertinent. I know some people are answering for other people, some things that you know about the process, so that's great. But yeah, Vogue.
I've reviewed for different organizations for grants and fellowships before. And it sounds to me like there's a discrepancy between what the application was asking for and what the reviewers were looking for. And like, I had to really fully decolonize my grant writing process to answer the questions for this grant, because it asked us to dream, because it asked us what it took for us to thrive. Like, I had a meltdown in the process. And so I don't know if you already did, but it might be good to have a circle and a in-depth conversation with the reviewers about decolonizing their process as well. Did they select the most audacious decisions that people made and the proposals that people made? Did they select the ones that were like, I just want to sit and soak my feet and chill? Like, did they select some of those projects? And I hope I hope they did. But if not, if you notice a discrepancy in the amount of money that was put towards rest, I hope that you would talk to them about reimagining what grant funds are utilized for, because a lot of this is about survival. And somebody else said that, like that, some of this is, can we pay for therapy? You know, some of this is about healthcare and things like that. So that's my request, because it sounds like you wanted us to dream, but what I'm reading sounds like they were like, what is this and why isn't it more structured? And thank you again. I know that this is work. I know.
I really appreciate that. And I guess we are all having to decolonize our minds in this process. The reviewers, you all as applicants, us as grant makers. And yeah, all of this that you're bringing is really helping with that. And I think with the dream and articulate that dream so that the person reading it gets your dream. I think that's still the mainstay. Like answering the question, we can't get away from that because this is the mode of communication. We don't know each other, people don't know you, and how you're able to communicate that is so important. And I really, really appreciate what you shared and that we're capturing all this on recording. I know, Luis, you weren't necessarily looking for an answer, but we did not particularly model this off of any program. I was inspired by some efforts to have an artist fund that actually didn't come to fruition. Not for us, it was another organization, and I was on the steering committee, and I thought, well, we can start this. You know, we had unrestricted funds. We received funds from Mackenzie Scott, and that allowed us to do this and talk about dreaming and talk about, you know, things that we wouldn't, you know, normally talk about. And it's given us also data. And I don't want, at the same time as I'm saying that, I don't want you to feel like guinea pigs, but it is in that sense that now we're able to be more influential when we talk to funders and say, hey, you know, these artists are looking to survive, are needing these things and in this way. And so we're able to sort of reach out in new ways because of what you're sharing with us. So we're sort of co-laboring with you. If I had to put it that way, I kind of do. I want to just search for any more questions, and I want to open up space for Miss Margie.
Sorry, I don't.
Is someone with a hand? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's me. It's Luis.
Okay.
So I didn't want to jump in too quickly, but I did want to just say one thing that I think might be beneficial. I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit that provides mentorship to emerging artists. And when I saw this particular application, not only as an artist myself did I really want to apply, but I strongly encouraged everyone that I mentor in my programs to also apply, realizing that, you know, we would all be, in a sense, competing against each other, but there's such a huge gap in terms of who gets funding. People that look like us, that sound like us, that have experiences like us, we never have these opportunities. And, you know, it feels oftentimes like we are crabs in a bucket, you know, through these competitive processes. And obviously having the data that you have now is amazing. And I think if there were a way to maybe in some way share components of that data with us as arts administrators, I think that would also help us build cases for our own constituencies. Because if I can go to foundations and other funders that are open or amenable, at least, to having discussions that surround how emerging artists or artists of color are, you know, supported in our local community, I feel like that would really help, at least me as an arts administrator, encourage more donations, more, grant opportunities, that kind of thing. So I realize it's kind of a lot of information or a lot of work to sort of pull that kind of data into a useful format. But I would greatly appreciate it if that was something that would be made available to us.
Thanks, Luis. I really appreciate that. And actually in conversation with our technology director, because if you know WESTAF, we have 5 technology platforms that are useful to artists and arts administrators. And so we're looking at, we have this data lake that's going. And so we're looking at how we can pull data in a way that's effective. This is something that we definitely want to do. Capacity is an issue, but we want to utilize it. We don't want to just capture all this information and not share it. So thank you for that request. I wanted to, David, I wanted to say something about your comment. You say, or question, if focusing on community building, would you consider a general operating grant for artists to use as they see fit rather than focusing on a finished product? And so that kind of gives me pause, because that's what that was our endeavor, for it to be an operating grant and not for a finished product. It was always about process, need. That's where we saw it from the beginning. And I have to say, without sharing too much from our coaching sessions with Miss Margie, with the cohort of awardees, out of their own, they started sharing what this money will be enable them to do. And it was a lot of personal things, And I just, I want to just respect, their, and that we're not asking, we're never asking what people are using the money for in that sense, but out of their own, people just started sharing, and it was really personal things. So, I with David's question and then the various thumbs ups that are there, it also makes me want to make sure that we refine, so that it's clear that that is the focus, that it is operating, that it is for you to live. Some people are paying rent. Some people are, these are real life things that are happening. So, and we are looking for artists that are deeply rooted in community. That community is a focus of their work, right? That there's a grounding, that there's a lens on community, that it's not art on a wall only, that there's really this connection to community. That was just really important for us, because we do feel like folks that are working in community in that way don't receive funds. There aren't a lot of grant awards in that for folks like that. To immediate projects versus other. Well, the questions were all the same. So what I did when I got all the highest scores, and then I reviewed the comments, and I also wanted to share this. We did not panel. I just felt like we don't need your work to be overanalyzed or you to be overanalyzed. And what I found was that, obviously all reviewers didn't read all the same thing, but there were a group of reviewers that read every application. There were at least 4 to 5 reviewers that read one application, right? And so there was a lot of, and then from there, because we're a regional organization, we endeavor and need to represent the region. So that's where our intention was to fund in each state or jurisdiction. And so then from there, we didn't have some, as I mentioned, were not represented, but from there, so we were able to cull to state or jurisdiction, really review comments. But there was there was a lot of agreement without anybody having to advocate for who they want and all those things that we do in paneling. There was just a lot of agreement in the scores. There were very, very high scores, and the comments went with it. So I do want to say that. And I really I didn't feel that the decisions were made because they were seasoned artists. I have been a panelist on early, mid-career, and seasoned, and that is something we could surely think about. I'm not so sure, honestly, about the discipline part, but the different stages of career could be something. Just looking at the amount of funds that we have and that we don't want to be giving $1,000, $500. We really want to give something that's going to be somewhat substantial. And we hope year over year, my budget year over year is to increase. Chibueze, am I pronouncing it correctly? I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's Chibueze. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I just have a quick question. It said in the email that we would get instructions on how we would receive our individual application review or comments. Are you going to share that today? Or
Yes. I'm so sorry for skipping that. Will this be? Yes. So the recording will be shared. I'm getting some private comments. The recording will be shared with all of you and to everyone who RSVP'd. In terms of the individual comments, we have received all of your requests. And on the 1st of June, I have 3 new staff members starting. One of them, their first project is to send all of the comments. So please, thank you for your patience on that. Our new staff member will be handling that starting June 1, June 1 is a Thursday. Starting June 1, that's their first project to get going on. It will take some time. There are many, many of you and very few of us. That said, I want to right size the expectation. The instruction was at least, obviously, score and read, and at least one constructive, solid comment, right? So not necessarily paragraphs and paragraphs, but a solid constructive comment. So I just wanted to, and that's one reason why we wanted to have this session as well, because there was so much constructive feedback coming overall from reviewers that I wanted to share that. But you will get your individual comments, and I would say those in hand with this, with these overarching comments should be fairly useful. That said, when we have the next round, we will have informational sessions. We're giving ourselves enough time to look at the data, look at your feedback. I'm going to drop also, because I know we're 9 minutes past the hour. I just want to make sure that I share this survey with you, because if there's anything that you didn't put in the chat or get to say, please complete this really, really short survey to just let us know if this was helpful, what else that we can do. You have my email, you have Miss Margie's email. We really honestly want to hear from you. And I'll email that form too. So if you could just do that. Are there any other burning questions? Otherwise, I don't want to take too much more of your time.
I'm just burning to ask the team a question, and it's about this word community. And I just saw someone else put it in a chat. I want you guys to think about how you define community in the environment that you're working in the project that you're framing, in the space that you're taking up around this. So the community may not be the typical understanding of a geographic area, a group of people that share the same cultural background or heritage background. A community could be the group of students that you work with. It could be the group of artists that you are collaborating with. So I want you to just think about helping us in the survey or in just in an email, but for yourselves, it's going to be powerful if we hear from you how you are defining the community that's a part of this dream that you're creating and presenting to us. So finally, I will say again, this is moving us away from, you guys have beautiful language, colonial practices, all of that language. We're moving in a direction that is trying to let you know that we're listening. And we may not get it all in the first 2 or 3 years, but we are listening. And I just want you to stay in the game, guys. Think about how much time you want to devote to this kind of fundraising process for yourselves, all of those tactical things. But this is not the give up season at all. This is the season to stay engaged with WESTAF, with your state arts agencies, share the information, share the experience with groups of people, that you work with. And I just want to tell you how proud I am to just be in this company with you and see all this creative energy. And I mean it. So just stay in the game because you cannot win if you're not in the game. Thank you all.
Thank you, Miss Margie. And you see, this is what you get. This is what you get being in the program. You get Miss Margie's wisdom, but she doesn't have to be here tonight. I said, if you can, you can. And here she is because she really cares. So please, reach out to us. Thank you so much, you all. I'll get this recording out and the slides in the next few hours. Take good care and be in touch.